Today is November 27th, 2022, and it's a gigantic honor to have Charlotte Hill O'Neill, aka Mama C, on the show. Mama C is someone I've long admired and looked up to for her work, dedication, sacrifice, and just for the person and example that she has been and continues to be to so many. Mama C is a veteran Black Panther, community activist, poet, author, an ATR priestess, an internationally renowned visual artist, musician, performance artist. Mama C is also the co-director of the United African Alliance Community Center based in Arusha, Tanzania. Mama C is also a published author of 2 books. Her first poetry book is entitled Warrior Woman of Peace, and her second book is entitled Life Slices, A Taste of Magic. Mama C also continues and has been a leader in the struggle for the freedom of political prisoners and those in exile. She joins us today from Tanzania. I could go on and on about Mama C and why we admire and appreciate her so much, but let's hear directly from Mama C. Thank you again so much for coming on the show. It's a true honor, and welcome to the show.
Oh, the honor is mine, brother. I always love sharing about our life and our present and our past and all of that. But I got 3 poetry books. The last one just came out in November last year, actually, and it's called Homage, and I love it. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for. I wasn't aware of that, and I'll add that into the description of this video and links so that people can find the book. I wasn't aware, and I'll have to get it
Okay.
myself.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.com, and it's also on African Perspectives, which is the publisher that's based in Johannesburg. So yeah.
Wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Thank you for adding that. Well, I guess
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. When were you born?
I was born in Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, in March 9th, 1951. So I'm a Pisces, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm such a creative being. I've never met a Pisces who wasn't a artist in some kind of way. So I grew up in the all Black community uh, in Kansas City, Kansas. My dad was a fireman, and my mom was a musician, and she had her own beauty salon, and she was an entrepreneur. Both of them were entrepreneurs, actually. And my dad was a singer also. I have 2 siblings, an older sister and a younger brother. I'm a middle child, and all that encompasses, if it encompasses anything. So I loved school. When I was growing up, I loved school. And we were encouraged by our teachers to really excel in school. I was born an artist. I directed my first band when I was 5 years old in kindergarten at the Memorial Hall. And I wasn't even nervous or nothing. I just got up there and directed that band. So I was always into the plays and the choirs and the music and all of that. Matter of fact, my dad kept so many of my artistic compositions from the time I was like 4 years old, so I have many of those. I grew up in a blessed household, peaceful. My father and mother never and to argue. So, I never, my parents using cuss words, even though I found out later my dad used to cuss, but not around us. And it was blessed. I grew up in the Baptist church and Pentecostal church. And, to this day, even though I practice Orisha Ifa, which is traditional African religion, whenever I go back to Kansas City or other cities, and if I hear that they having a great gospel choir, I am there. Matter of fact, when I was in Birmingham during this last tour and I spoke at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, I got up in that pulpit, brother, and I got happy. I mean, I was shouting like some of those elder women on the motherboard where I grew up. It was so beautiful. It's the music that always gets me, because that's so much a part of who I am. That gospel vibe, that blues vibe, that jazz vibe, and of course that African flavored music. It's in my bones.
And where were your parents from?
Well, my mother was originally from Conway County, Arkansas, and they had a flood there when she was like 12 or something like that. And she grew up on a farm. She was the only child, and she used to always tell me, "Don't have just one child," because she was lonely when she was growing up. So when the flood came, they moved to Oklahoma, and from Oklahoma they moved to Kansas City, which is where she met my dad. My dad was born and raised in Kansas City, Kansas. He was a city boy, and he thought he was an urban slickster. So they met when I think she was 13 and he was 14, and they got married when she was 19 and he was 20. And they were married for, I think it was the 50th year that my mom passed away. And my dad passed away last year on February 10th, as a matter of fact, right here in Tanzania, right here at UAACC. And in the tradition of many tribes, if you live in a village, if you live in a rural area, you're allowed to bury your loved ones right there. So he's right outside our front door, and it's a beautiful area. We've made it into what I call our Egungun garden, or our ancestor garden, and it's plants everywhere. The wall, the people, our visitors can have access to the wall to sign their own loved ones, their own ancestors' name. So it's a beautiful place. We go out there and make music and poetry and laughing, and Dad's right in the middle of it. And he'd like to be the center of attention, so he continues to be that. My mother, though, is buried in Leavenworth because my dad was in the Army. So, he thought he was going to be buried there too, but he changed his mind. Thought of the hassle of taking his body, his remains, and all that. So he said, "Just put me right here."
Well, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
But and what was life like growing up in Kansas City in terms of living in a segregated society?
It was lovely. It was blessed. Like I was saying, I love school because our teachers came from our community, and either went to school with our parents or partied with our parents or go to church with our parents. They were beholden to our parents and the community, to make sure that they kept pressure on the students so we could all learn. So I love that. I didn't even realize we were segregated until I started going up what we call uptown on Minnesota Avenue, and we would go to some of those stores, and the storekeepers would like follow us around, and it was obvious that we were not welcome in the store, but we had everything we needed right there in our community. We had fresh fruit and vegetables. Everybody had some kind of garden, but you could also uh, add to what your family had, because there would be people who would come in from the countryside with their trucks full of all this beautiful we didn't call it organic back in the day, but it was definitely organic. If you need shoes repaired, you go to Mr. Harris's shoe shop. Had restaurants everywhere. We had our own movie theater. The one we used to go to was the Princess Theater, We had a bowling alley. We had sports, So it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And you could probably ask many of the young people we ain't young now, but we were back in the day, and you could ask them, what kind of life did we have? And it was, it wasn't a lot of violence. The police couldn't even like beat you up or nothing like that, because as it was with the teachers, it was the same with the police. They came from the community. So, you couldn't like be beating up people's child or young people or whatever. You very seldom saw that. You didn't see a lot of guns in the community the way it is now. People would sometimes have their knives, but you just didn't see that. I didn't grow up in a violent situation at all. Yeah, that was a real blessing.
So what brought you to activism?
The thing that brought me to activism was I would be looking at TV and I would see, especially in the South, people who are trying to get the right to vote, or do whatever, and the police would be turning fire hoses on them that would like bruise them up and sometimes even take some of the skin off. I would see them sicking dogs on people and actually biting them. I would see them jailing young kids. It's always the youth who lead the revolution, and those youth, they were on it. So all that violence that was going on, I started wanting to know more about that. I had already been studying African history, or we called it Black history back in the day, and I loved that. And I was a part of the Kansas City School of Human Dignity. I was the youngest one because everybody else was married and had children. And we would go around to different community centers and churches. And once I was in high school, the teachers there, it was a newly integrated high school, Wyandotte. I got to tell you more about that, Wyandotte High School. And they would actually asked me to come and share some of my knowledge of Black history. So, after having seen, all the situation in the South and in the North, then I started seeing these images on TV and in the newspaper and in magazines of these fine Black brothers with their berets and their sunglasses and their leather jacket and marching. And I would see sisters with their combat boots and their big afros or shortcut afros. And not only were they in military formation, sometimes marching with their guns, but then I found out about the community service. And that's what really drew me to being a member of the Black Panther Party. I ran away from home fresh out of high school, as soon as I graduated, because I had been skipping school anyway and going over, we call it over town, going to Kansas City, Missouri. And so I could go to some of the PE classes, the political education classes. And I started seeing the seriousness of these young people, and some were a bit older. And then I started participating in the Breakfast for School Children program. But before you could be a member, you had to read a lot. There was extensive book list, and it was mostly about revolutionaries in Africa, even in Korea, Vietnam, South America, and that it was instilled in us to look at ourselves as members of the international community. And to this day, that's how I feel, that I'm a member of the international community and the global African family. So that's how I got interested. And that's when I signed on the dotted line. And even though I was skipping school, and in those days we could intercept the the notes that the school would mail to our parents. I don't think you can do it now because they, have it on digital and everything. But even though I had discipline problems, I still graduated as a member of the National Honor Society. So I had good grades.
And did you want to say more about Wyandotte? I think it's your high school.
Yes, I did. It had been newly integrated, I think, for like 3 years, something like that. And all just about all the teachers were white. I had my first encounter with white teachers in junior high school. And like I said, I'd never been around the Caucasian community, the European American community, or whatever you want to term uh, white people. So I had a lot of discipline problems, even in junior high. I had like a chip on my shoulder, thinking that, you know, people were being racist toward me. A lot of times they really were. And so when I got in high school, um, the vice principal was a black man. He was an African American, Mr. Roan. I'll never forget him. And in high school is when I started wearing my hair a little short, froze, real low cut, little part, same way I got now. Uh, and I would wear my African gowns. I went from mini skirts to floor length African gowns, and he he actually suspended me because I was dressing in my Afrocentric expression of who I am and was. And my parents had to come up there and get me back in school. So I think that's very ironic that it was a black man who had a problem with that. Uh, when Martin Luther King got assassinated, I was one of the student leaders who was demanding that they fly the flag at the school at half mast. And if I remember right, they refused to do that. So we had a walkout, and we walked out, all of us. It was, I don't know how many. I can't estimate how many students there were. I know it had been more than 1,000 in the school. It was a big school, really one of these rich like schools. And I was a busing victim. I say it was rich because we even had stuff like fencing and archery and lacrosse, stuff I'd never even heard of. And certainly it wasn't in the black schools. I was going to that school because I was a busing victim. Even though I grew up in the inner city, my parents, they built a house that was in what was in the suburbs. And so I had to be bused to school every day. That's why I say I was a busing victim. So I was one of the students who led all the other students to a school, Sumner High School, which was, I don't know how many miles from us. And the police actually ended up like escorting us because what they was doing, they didn't want us to be like breaking store windows or things like that. But it was peaceful. And we went in there and got all those students out of class and went into the auditorium, and we had a really good memorial. So I remember that so well. And it gives me a good feeling that I was a part of that and one of the leaders of that. So that was before I joined the party. Uh, yeah.
And how long was your commute to school?
Oh man, let me think. It had to have been. I remember we had to catch the bus around 6 in the morning, maybe 6:15, and school didn't start until like 8, something like that. It had to have
Mm,
been at least an hour, at
mm,
least. And
wow.
I really didn't like it because I didn't like that because the many of the kids that I grew up with, they were going to Sumner, which was our black school, but I had to
Mm.
be bused to Wyandotte High School, which was the integrated school. But it turned out all right. And it turned out all right. I love to learn there too. Even though I was one of the ones to introduce, a more Afrocentric way of being. I've never lost that. My parents really encouraged us to love who we were and who we are. And I give thanks for that. Mm-hmm. If you look in our yearbook, I was the only female who had a natural, a
Wow.
natural like this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else had their straightened hair or their wigs or what. I was the only one. I don't know how many hundreds of youth were in our 11th and 12th grade. Mm-hmm.
And where did that perspective come from? That where like what motivated you to have natural hair at that age when many of your peers didn't?
Yes, yes. It was that pride. It was that pride of being an African woman, a Black woman. I grew up in the era where we were referred to as both Negroes and colored. Hmm? I know people don't say that at all anymore, but and then I grew up with James Brown, "Say It Loud," "I'm Black and I'm Proud," and that whole wave of being culturally aware of who you are as an African person. So I'm blessed to have come to that understanding early in life as a teenager, and I've never ever changed. It's who I am.
Hmm. And before you joined the Black Panther Party, you had pictures up on your wall of Panther comrades. Is that correct?
Yes, I sure did. As a matter of fact, I've saw this handsome brother who had his gun surrounded by other Panthers, and he was announcing the formation of Kansas City chapter of the Black Panther Party. And I had that picture on my wall, and I didn't even know I would ever meet him, Brother Pete O'Neill. He was right in the middle of the collage that I had on the wall. I never thought that not only would I meet him, but that we would be married and together for 53 years. That blows my mind to this day. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that was something that was meant to be.
Absolutely. And how old were you when you joined the party?
18, fresh out of high school. So
Um, and
I never worked in the States. I've always done community work, because when I graduated, I went to Western Union to learn to be a key punch operator. You probably know what that is, huh?
no, I
But
don't.
yes, yes. So I was learning how to do that, and they pay you a little something, and all that little money I would hand over to the party, huh? And finally, I think I lasted maybe 3 weeks, if that long. Then I said, "Man, this ain't for me." It was too much community work to do. So the only thing that I've ever done in these 50 something years has been to serve the people. And I think that is beautiful. I think that is blessed that I'm able to do that. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And how did your parents feel when you joined the Black Panther Party?
Hoo-hoo. Well, they wasn't so happy about it. You know why? Because everything that they would read in the paper, everything that they would see on TV was negative, you know, and I actually ran away from home, and Dad would be calling over there, and I tell people don't tell him where I am or nothing like that. And I remember, I apologize to them for this too. I went and I drove up in our Panther van, had the Panther just like, wait, wait, just
Yeah,
like
it's
that
on.
on there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I went and got all my clothes, and Dad was crying and Mom was crying. Don't do it, don't do nothing. So I said, no, this is the path that I want to following. Plus, I had gotten, like I told you, I was a very good student. I had gotten a scholarship to go to a college in Austin, Texas, because I aspired to be a doctor. I wanted to be a, a gynecologist, obstetrician. But I let all that go so that I could join the party and work there. And there was 3 houses, we used to call them Panther pads, where all the youth would stay, and we all had the job of keeping things clean and cooking and all that. And we all had to go on bivouac, and learn about weapons and how to clean your weapon and reassemble it and all of that. And there was a lot of male chauvinism in the party, I must say. I think in all chapters, so sisters had to stand up for themselves, and we did. And Brother Pete, who was the founder of the Kansas City chapter, he ran a tight ship. He really believed in discipline. And if you was going to be a part of it, you had to, you had to do what he said. Is what it boiled down to, because he was brother chairman, and but it was good. It was good, and I'm happy that I learned some discipline back in the day.
And can you talk about the first time you met Brother Pete O'Neill?
I'll give you the sanitized version, okay? So, as a child of the 60s, we would experiment with drugs, pills, LS, all that kind of stuff. I mean, everybody smoked herb. That wasn't good. That ain't considered a drug. I still don't consider that to be a drug. But we have been dropping what you call red devils and yellow jackets. That's the street name for them. Everybody, several of us was messed up. And I was messed up to the point where I could barely talk. And so this is a situation that Pete met me in, because he had been on tour to some of the other chapters and branches, I think in Omaha and in Des Moines. So I hadn't met him. I'd been living in Panther Path for almost several weeks, maybe a month, I don't know, and never met him. So he comes around the corner unexpected and see all us messed up, And he was furious because there were rules, you had to be disciplined. You had to be not inebriated while you're on duty. And we were, because what if the police had come? We weren't in no shape to defend ourselves or the office or people in the community. So he disciplined us, right? Then he asked me, who are you? And I told him, I'm Charlotte Hill, and he was upset because he told me I didn't have the right to speak because I was so intoxicated. And I said, my daddy said I got the right to speak. Everybody was like, whoa, she's talking back to Brother Chairman, And so he made us do calisthenics in front of the whole community that was gathered there. It was very embarrassing, carrying each other on our backs and all kind of stuff. And then he finally locked us up in I guess you could call it the Panther jail or whatever. And he locked us up in that. It was like a big, what do you call those? Like a dresser, like a closet, like Chevron, is what we used to call it. And yeah, and a couple of days later, we met up again, and he wasn't angry anymore. And a month later is when I moved into his apartment. And I remember so well carrying my toothbrush up the steps, and I was like, wow, I'm staying with Brother Chad. And we've been together ever since, through thick and thin and otherwise.
And can you tell us a bit about you told us some about the Kansas City chapter, but a bit more, man, because oftentimes when people think of the Black Panther Party, all they really think of is rigorous self-defense, or the men in black leather jackets and berets. People often don't know about all the different services. You mentioned some, but can you tell us more about the Kansas City chapter in specific?
Yes, all the chapters, I think, had to have breakfast for school children programs, and we have a very strong one. Matter of fact, the churches, especially the United Methodist Church, were very supportive of those programs. We had three breakfast for school children programs in the basement or fellowship hall or recreation hall or whatever it was called in those days, in three churches, and we were feeding at one point like 700 children a day. So all these brothers and sisters who believed in defending the community, we also saw that it was very important that we address some of the needs of the community. And one of those needs was there was many children, for whatever reason, who were going to school without adequate breakfast. So you would see, we would stay up all night, we young people partying and everything, but we had to get up by 5 in the morning, 5:30, so we could be able to get ready for the breakfasts, and we were able to get the foods for the breakfast by going to many of the stores that were in the community and really demanding that they give back to the community. So we would get sometime eggs and bread and cereal and milk and vitamins, and at one point we were even getting steaks from some of the mafia in Kansas City. So the brother Pete always says that we were probably the only breakfast program in the country that was able to serve steaks, these little steaks at one point. Did I say milk and milk? And so,
Mhm.
we would cook the food together, serve it to the children, and we would also give them political education while they were eating, to tell them about how we had to come together as a community, to tell them about police brutality, to tell them that they had rights, And I'm telling you, Ryan, to this day, when I go back to Kansas City, inevitably, I'm going to meet somebody who was a part of that breakfast program, and it always brings tears to my eyes. They say, "You all fed me," and that's a beautiful thing. So I give thanks to the United Methodist Church and to people in the community and those stores who willingly, supplied us, and those who had to be coerced into supplying food to the community. Because, I mean, that if you look at it, if you in the middle of the community, you should give back as much as you can. That's only human, you know. Yeah.
Hmm. And
Hmm.
and there was also, I think it was called the Little Bobby Hutton Medical Clinic. Is that accurate?
Yes, yes, the little Bobby Hutton free medical clinic. So that's something else that many other chapters had, and we were able to establish that. And we had a couple of doctors and nurses who, were helping us run it. Now you couldn't get no operation there, nothing like that, but we could take care of minor injuries and things like that. And if it was something that we couldn't deal with, we would be able to refer them to some of the main hospitals. So that's something that we were very proud of. The little Bobby Hutton Medical Clinic. The Seattle chapter, and I didn't know this until I went to Seattle. I think this must have been 3 years ago, right before it was when COVID was supposed to happen, was already happening. And they took me to the site of their clinic that has grown into a hospital and still functioning. So, that makes me feel really, really good. And I think one of the California chapters was the first one, I think, who had started sickle cell anemia testing and letting the communities know about sickle cell anemia, because the majority of people who are victims of this are of African descent. Many people don't know that, you know. So it was so there were clothes giveaways where we would gather clothing and be able to help people. There were times when we could transport people to the various prisons so they could see their incarcerated loved ones. We help people learn about their rights. Some of the women who were on welfare, that they had rights. And one of the things that was very satisfying to me was the fact that some brothers and sisters joined the party and they could barely read or write. But we who were able to, we helped teach them, and to me that is a very, very good feeling, to know that you help somebody to learn to read and write. And the reason they wanted to is because they wanted to be a part of that. They to be, able to read those books that we were reading about, by Frantz Fanon and what's his name? Brawl and all those different people. And of course, Malcolm X. So many long books that we had to read. And we had a millimeter film. It was called The Battle of Battle of. Oh man, that was about the revolution in Algiers against the French. And matter of fact, some of that was going on in the film was at a section of the city called Baba Awed. And who would think that we would actually live in Baba Awed for a time when we were in Algeria with some of our comrades.
Mm. Before jumping to Algeria, one of the things you touched upon and wanted to hear more about was the role of women in the Black Panther Party, because again, the image that usually comes across is men in black leather jackets with berets, but the role of women does not get talked about enough.
It's very true. And lately there have been some books that touch on that. Matter of fact, I'm in one that just came out by Erica Huggins and
Mm-hmm. So
I don't know who
right
else.
here.
Erica Huggins, and you have it. You have it.
Yeah, the Erica Huggins book is right here. Women of the Black
Yes,
Panther Party, Comrade
yes,
Sisters.
right.
Yes.
Comrade Sisters. I was interviewed for that, for that, but I haven't read it yet because when I was coming back, I had so many heavy books. So when my daughter or my son comes the next month, they're gonna bring it. But I'm sure it's good. Yeah. So you know the women that were.
Robin Spencer has another book. Robin
Yes,
Spencer.
yes, I know
Yeah.
her very well. She's been here to the center.
Oh wow, that's
She
cool.
came here to the center several years ago. So the women that most people know about are, the prominent women like Kathleen Cleaver and I don't know who else, but she's one, and she's a dear friend. She's been here for 2 or 3 times to our center. And I'm godmother to her grandson. Hmm. But anyway,
Mhm.
yeah, and the sister did so much work, both organizing and keeping things together, and and setting principled examples. But again, chauvinism, patriarchal culture was also in the Black Panther Party, even though, we would have sessions, criticism and self-criticism going on. We would point out things like that, but it was still quite patriarchal, in my opinion, and I think that ran through most chapters. But yeah, but now, this being the time of the matriarchs, more and more stories are coming out about women and their role, not only as members of the Black Panther Party, but in the civil rights movement. It was so many women who what can I say? A Kiswahili word comes up, and Dacia, who were the driving forces, you know, in both the civil rights movement and in the Panther movement, you know, and people just don't know it, because I think it was more sensational to see these brothers in their leather and their shades and carrying their guns and everything. But we women also had to learn, also had to have weaponry training. You know, everybody was supposed to know how to shoot and break your gun down, keep it clean, and all that, and be able to defend yourself. Yeah.
Thank you for saying
So
that.
I'm glad that the time, huh? What you say?
No, keep going. I was just saying thank
I'm
you for
glad
saying
that,
that.
yeah. So I'm glad that some of this history now is being held up and revealed. It needs to be 50 something years later. And most of the veteran Panthers that I know, if they have enough of their health left, just about everybody is still doing some kind of community work, So we have that saying, once a Panther, always a Panther, whether they're doing work to sensitize the community and the world about the political prisoners and people in exile, like Brother Pete, like Sister Asada, whether they're doing that, whether they're participating in uh, um, providing food for the communities that they live in. I just saw some comrades in San Diego who always have their food giveaways. And also in Houston, they do the same thing. It's still going on, whether it's being a mentor, teaching young people, whatever it is, we're still doing it. The Black Panther Party still flows in our blood, still is a part of our DNA, which formed to. And I'm so happy that even though Brother Peter's in exile, we are still able to do the community work that we were doing as members of the Black Panther Party. And I like to say that's our greatest revenge, that it never stopped. Anything, it has increased, you know. Yes.
Mm. Yes, thank you for saying that. And then getting back to Kansas City in the late 60s, early 70s, things really seemed to heat up, and the attack against the Panthers and other liberation movements seemed to come to a head in that period. Can you explain what the climate was like and what was going on, particularly in Kansas City at that time?
Yes, I think Kansas City, the Kansas City chapter was the first chapter that was instigated as, what do they call it? One of the greatest threats to America. Well, it was called something. The Senate something investigation. Anyway, so it was Edgar Hoover who said that the party was the greatest threat to the internal security of America. And you had to ask yourself, why would he say that? Hmm? Why would he, COINTELPRO had already been formed, but why would he step up the operations of COINTELPRO, which is the counterintelligence insurgency program? It couldn't have been because we believed in defending our community and we had weapons. It couldn't have been that when you consider that America has the most weapons than anybody on the planet. Hmm? What it was, in my humble opinion, was the fact that we were one of the catalysts that was bringing people together, whether they were hippies, whether they were white mother country radicals, whether they were the brown berets or the red berets or whoever, whether they were Vietnam veterans. We were an example of what it meant to actually form a united front. Hmm? And that was the threat. That was the threat. We were helping to change the mindset of so many young people. There was a movement going on. There was a peace movement going on. There was a stop the war movement going on. There was Black people getting rights. That movement was going on. And we were all, we became a family. And that was a real threat. We were like, showing through our example the things that the government was doing. The free breakfast program for children. The national government into things like Head Start and programs like that. They the widespread movement of feeding children, of growing food, you know, of standing up for people's rights. Even the Black Panther Party was standing up for gay rights, even way back then. Nobody was doing that. So all of that was a threat, and that's why we were the greatest threat to the internal security of America. Yep.
And can you explain the particular attack on the Kansas City chapter?
Yeah. Well, besides the police vamping on people and beating them and all that kind of thing, Brother Pete was beat one time in the chief of police's office because, we went there to uh, write a story about what was going on in the police department. And, as journalists for the Black Panther Party newspaper, and this was on national TV where they vamped on us. Brother Pete had been shot, and and people were jailed all the time. And this helped to deplete our funds because you had to bail people out, right? This was a constant thing. You could be busted just for having a foot off the sidewalk when you were trying to sell the Black Panther Party newspaper. So Brother Pete, as many of the leaders all across the country, uh, he was targeted and charged with what would have been a very minor charge, knowing that Kansas City has a lot of hunting going on across the state lines. Nobody would think of nothing like that, because the state line that separates Kansas from Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas from Kansas City, Missouri, is actually a line drawn on the road in many places. So, and he used to hunt and do things like that, but they charged him with carrying a gun across state lines. He was convicted of that, even though the main witness admitted that she was a paid FBI informant, even though they were illegally wiretapping our apartment, even though we never even had to pay a phone bill because, they were listening in on our conversations. And it was just so many discrepancies in that trial. And, he was convicted and received 4 or 5 years. And then he had another one coming up shortly after that, disrupting a religious service. And uh, that's when we decided to leave. And we thought we were going to come back in like 2 years, but it didn't happen like that. It was 20 years before I came back. And because Brother Pete left after he was convicted, he's considered he can't come back. If he does, he will be immediately sent to prison. So we have a lawyer who came here, Dr. Paul Magnarella, who was he was a professor at University in Florida, and he was also a human rights lawyer. And the International War Crimes Tribunal for Rwanda was held here in Arusha. And while he was here participating in that, he found out about Brother Pete's case, and he started reading up on it and everything, and saw all these errors. It was definitely a good example of not only racism, but also of the fact that he was a revolutionary and they wanted to come down on him, right? So he started investigating, and he became our lawyer and was doing all this pro bono, and even presented it before the court 3 times, and each time it was turned down because Brother Pete left. And he's written a book about it. It's called Panther in Exile, and he's still our lawyer. And so what he wanted to do, and what Brother Pete agreed, was not to get a pardon, because people have been campaigning for him, petitioning for him to get a pardon for years. And Brother Pete would always say, it ain't about me, focus on the political prisoners, right? What he wanted is for that to be wiped off the books, to be, I guess the word is exonerated. I guess that's the correct word, but wiped off the books, because he said he didn't do it. He hadn't done anything to be pardoned for or apologized for. But that ain't gonna happen. And at this age, he's 82 now. Why would he go back when he's living his best life, when he's walking in his purpose? When he's able to affect so many young people who come from all over the world to come here, study abroad students, university students, high school students, not only who come from the States, but people here too. Why would he go to prison when he is walking in his purpose? That don't make any sense. And still carrying on the work of the Black Panther Party at United African Alliance Community Center. He said he's been happier, more fulfilled than at any time in his life, right here in Tanzania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the book you mentioned is an excellent book called Black Panther in Exile: The Pete O'Neill Story. I highly recommend that to everyone. It's an excellent book. And the thing you have mentioned about the FBI tapping the telephones, that's something that same exact story is consistent with everyone I've interviewed, and everything I've heard is that the Panthers never paid the phone bills, and somehow the phones always stayed on. And then later it's found out that
Yeah.
the phones were tapped, so it had to have been the FBI.
Yes. Yes.
And then I guess
They were going our They would
go
go
ahead.
on our parents' jobs and harass them, all kind of things like that. Really infantile stuff.
Yeah, I mean, petty is not a strong enough word. um, and then can you explain getting to Algeria? You had mentioned the Battle of Algiers, and now you're the movie, the film, The Battle of Algiers, and now you're in Algeria. Can you explain that process, how you got there, the transition of being there, etc.?
It was a beautiful experience. And, that was during the time of the split. I guess you could break down the East Coast, West Coast. And it was Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen who were uh, the founders of the international section of the Black Panther Party. So we really didn't know if they was aligned with the East Coast or the West Coast or who. So when we got there, and Brother Pete went to the office, and the first thing Elders said was, "We've been waiting on you," and he was really taken aback. He said that his mother had rest her soul, rest in peace, had been contacting, writing Eldridge some kind of way, and was telling him that her son, Pete O'Neill, would be coming there. So, so they had actually been expecting us, you know. The camaraderie there was beautiful, you know, as the camaraderie was in any chapter that you went to. But the difference here, the difference there was the fact that we were able to meet revolutionaries, people in exile from all over the world. You know, that was Algeria then was the hub of the freedom fighters, uh, the freedom fighting organizations from all over the world. You know, you had the North Koreans, the North Vietnamese, the ANC, SWAPO, people from South America, you know, and we were living there and welcomed there as revolutionaries, as freedom fighters. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I loved it. I loved it, and I learned so much. That's where our first child was born, you know, and it was a Muslim country, majority Muslim, and you know, we were sisters who was wearing mini skirts and all that kind of thing. So that didn't go down well with the community. But most of us didn't know. We'd never been outside the country. Many of us didn't know about Islamic, uh, the Muslim community and the different rules and everything. But we lived there for 2 years. And many of our comrades were there, some in exile. And after some hijackings that took place, things started deteriorating between the government. It was President Boumediene then, the government and the international section of the Black Party. Even though the hijackers weren't Panthers, but they were supporters in a way. And they hijacked the plane. The first one bought like $500,000, I think, and the Algerian government confiscated the money, sent the plane back, and gave us the hijackers, who were apolitical, really. And then the second one, which happened shortly after that, it was a family from, I think they were from Detroit, I think. And some kind of way they had broken out one of the prisoners, and he and the family came, and I think they had $1 million, and you know, to support the revolution, even though they weren't Panthers either, but they believed in, you know, in the work that we were doing. Anyway, the government seized the money, sent the plane back, and gave us the hijackers. Some of them eventually went to France to live. I think some of them have passed away too. But anyway, a lot of things were going down with the government, and it wasn't as supportive as it was in the beginning. And simultaneously, there was a pretty large population of Africans from the diaspora, or what I like to call us now is members of the global African community. And they were urging us to come to Tanzania because this was the era of President Nyerere, who was President Julius Nyerere, who was the first, who's the founding father of Tanzania, and he was very Pan African in his thinking, as were many of his ministers and many other people in the community. And this is when the Ujamaa project was going on, and people were learning how to read and write and work together and forming collectives and all this kind of thing. And so people in Tanzania was urging us, y'all need to come here. Why don't you try Tanzania? People are friendly. They look at us as brothers and sisters. They're Pan African in their thinking. So that's what we decided to do. And it was 1972. And we rolled into Tanzania. And as soon as we got there, I felt immediately at home. And little did I know until years later when I was getting ready to be initiated into the Ancestor Society, and you had to get what's called a roots reading, which, through divination, uh, uh, the priest, the Babalawo, is able to ascertain something about your history. Huh? And come to find out, even though my matriarchal side, through DNA testing, I see that it come from West Africa, specifically Cameroon, Nigeria, Mali, and Congo. So I always thought that, that's where I come from. That's where my bloodline is. But come to find out through this roots reading that my patriarchal line was from where Tanzania is now. And further, it was discovered, it was revealed that my ancestors in whereas Tanzania now were artists, were diviners, were priests, were doing community work with mothers and children, were very highly respected in the community. The royalties would come there to get readings and to do whatever. And then at a certain time, we apparently offended the royalties and called them out. Hmm? And we eventually were sold into slavery. And that is how this line that I'm descended from ended up in America, you know. And a lot of people don't realize that millions of people were kidnapped and stolen and sent into slavery from East Africa. We always think of West Africa, but there were many who came from East Africa, and yeah. So it's really something that the things that my ancestors were doing there are things that I'm still doing. So that bloodline is very strong, and I give thanks for that. Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly powerful to learn about one's roots um, and all that. That's incredibly powerful. And one of the things you talked about was the skyjackers. I really don't think that history is that well known. You know, that the extent and the prevalence of skyjacking in that time period, and I guess the pressure that was putting on the Algerian government by the U.S. Because the U.S. was scrambling, trying to figure out how to curb skyjacking generally. Um,
And especially because, if I remember correctly, there was some kind of gas uh, um, collaboration that was going on between Algeria and the States. So, if they stood to make a whole bunch of money, they're going to kick us to the curb. So I think they had something to do with it also. They were
national
being
doubt.
pressured. Yeah.
Hmm. And I guess what was you had described it a little bit about the transition to Tanzania, but was it uh, my understanding is it was a bit of a transition, particularly for Brother Pete.
Yes, yes, it was because, about, I guess this is still the right statistic, that around 70% of the population here are farmers. Hmm? And, you know, we had to learn how to farm because we knew nothing about it. We knew absolutely nothing. Even though my grandfather had a big garden, my dad used always had a garden, but we never had to do the work ourselves. And so that was a challenge. And our neighbors, once we moved up here, up north where we are now, they would see us digging holes like a foot deep and putting seeds in it and expecting it to grow, and they finally said, we got to do something about these young people, and they started teaching us. Plus, somebody had sent us some Mother Earth catalogs, Mother Earth books. Some of the people in the 60s, they'll remember that. It was like a back to the land kind of books. And, people say they're still publishing. So that was very helpful. That became like our Bible. Mm. And we became homesteaders. And we were raising thousands of chicken literally at a time and supplying hotels and General Tire and we would make condiments like mustard from scratch, Dijon and yellow mustard from the seeds, and we'd make barbecue sauce, and we were raising pigs and we were making gourmet smoked sausages. We still have the original smokehouse here. And I've written on there, well, I had an artist write on there that this is the original uh, smokehouse, and there's still people who ask us, when are you going to start making that smoked sausage again? It was very, very popular. And when we first moved, and cheese, we would make cheese. It was my job to milk the cow. I had to learn how to do that. And so we did that for years. And we were able to get this land where we are now in Embasani Village and start developing it. All these trees you see now, we planted those trees ourselves. The buildings we did ourselves. Of course, we had masons to help and carpenters and all that, but all of it was designed especially by Brother Pete. He's real good at things like that, huh? And so the community here started seeing the things that we were doing when we first moved to Embasani, and they asked us to share our knowledge with the youth, and they gave us a plot of land that's about almost 4 kilometers from here. Hmm? Almost 4 miles? Yeah, almost 4 miles from here. And that's where we built our first community center. It was called the United African American Community Center. Huh? Later on, we changed it to American African Alliance Community Center, which was more descriptive of the work that we do. Huh? And then it was a hassle going back and forth, and it got too small because it was so popular, and teachers were bringing their students there, and we'd have performances on the stage and all kinds of stuff. So we said, why don't we build classrooms here? And we started doing that. But before we started doing that, you know, uh, Brother Pete learned how to build windmills. We had wind generated electricity, 12-volt electricity, which I loved it. And I was quite disappointed when we finally got the national electricity because it seemed so harsh and bright. But one of our problems was we didn't have running water. So we had to haul water every few days. We were masters at recycling the water and all this. So when Brother Geronimo Jijaga, who was one of our Panther comrades and who had been locked down for 27 years for something that he didn't do, he was a victim of COINTELPRO also. When he was finally released, the government gave him compensation of a whole lot of money. So when he came out to visit us, because we had known him, years ago in Kansas City, when he came out to visit us, he asked us what could he help with, what was our greatest need, and our greatest need at the time was water, because you need water more than you do electricity. So he gave us money just like that, very generous brother, so that we could get a drill crew out here. I think they were from Australia, and they came and they drilled for like 3 or 4 days, 4 or 5 days, and finally hit underground stream at, I think it was 75 meters or something, like 75 meters, that's 75 feet, one of them. And it was like we had struck oil, and I remember there was drumming and everybody was happy, and the first thing that we did was put a public tap, so our community could start having water, where before they had to walk miles to get just a bucket of water. Now they just turn on the tap and we're still using that water. Huh? So I
Wow.
don't know how to determine when that underground stream is gonna run out, but we still got it and still supplying the community. And there's a school in Chicago called the Betty Shabazz International Charter School, who knew about our water project, and they raised money to get us an immersible pump. And we're still using that immersible pump too, which allows us to pump up water into the tanks. We have several tanks, and this allows the water to flow easily to the faucet, the tap that's outdoors. So that was a real blessing. And Brother Geronimo loved it so much here that he ended up moving here about 10 minutes away from us. And, Brother Pete helped him build a house there. And he lived there for, I think, 6 years until he passed away. Huh? And yes, and some of his ashes were taken up to Mount Kilimanjaro, as were some of our other comrades, including Mondo, who we knew years ago. He passed away just a few years ago. Hmm. Yeah, so it's been an adventure.
Hmm.
And Brother Pete formed the Leaders of Tomorrow Children's Home, I think maybe 14 years ago, maybe 15 years, I don't remember. But, that's his project, and he's been raising like 28 children for all this time at different levels. The ones who live here now with us are in primary school. Some of the others are in secondary school and boarding, and some of them have graduated. So that's been a project that's very dear to his heart. I've worked mostly with the older youth in the community. We have art classes here, we have music classes, we have a recording studio, we have sewing and beading and all kind of things. Especially if someone comes who has a skill that we don't already teach, we incorporate their skill into the curriculum also. So it's a beautiful, fulfilling life, and the fact that I'm able to come to the States just about every year for the Heal the Community tour. This is the first year I've been away from home for 3 months, but many other universities booked me, and community centers and just I went to so many cities. So I'm already starting to prepare for next year, 2023, and I'll be coming there.
um, all that is so amazing, and it's so much of I want to go through. Geronimo G. Jagger Pratt, you had mentioned that you're Kathleen Cleaver, you're the godmother of Kathleen Cleaver's grandson. That would also be Geronimo Pratt's child, right?
Yes, with
Yeah.
Joji
Uh-huh.
Yakum. Yeah, I was there when he was born. He was born right here in Arusha. Yes, and I see them every now and then when I go back to Atlanta. Hmm. Yeah.
And what Geronimo was someone I greatly admire. Just briefly, I guess, what can you tell us a bit what he was like?
He was a funny brother. He was always full of jokes, and he was so generous, and he was very much into keeping in shape, and he was a dear brother, friend, and comrade to Brother Pete, and he was my friend too. We were family, you know, and we remain family with his wife and children, and with Kathleen.
So I guess my next question is are there, you have mentioned many of the projects that you're working on in Tanzania and that you've worked on over the decades you've been there. Is there anything that you want our audience to know about that you haven't mentioned that, you know, possibly our audience could support, or just that you want us to know about?
Yes, yes. You know, the reason we've been able to do so much in all these years, and this is like 3.5 acres where the center is, and then we were gifted another 6 acres about 10 minutes from here that we're trying to develop that now. But like continuing scholarships for the children who are students and leaders of tomorrow, children's home, you know, they can help support when we, you know, our art classes, you know, they can bring, which a lot of our visitors do, you know, they bring like art supplies, sewing supplies, things like that. So supplies are real good, but they can also support financially. That's We're always in need of that because we've never had grants or anything like that. We've been able to keep this dream going, to make it a reality, you know, the maintenance and all of that, because people contribute. People contribute when they come here and stay here. We have accommodations for people to stay here, and they contribute to that, you know, or just contribute off. We've never done GoFundMe campaigns or nothing like that, but I've been kind of thinking about that lately, you know. But that's how they can help support. And we have a website, huh? And we also, people can support directly uh, uh, by checks, by um, um, what do you say?
Maybe PayPal or
By,
some other.
yeah, things like that. PayPal, uh, things like we have a new bank account, things like that. They can write me, and I can, you know, let them know. That might be better. So they can. I'm on Facebook as Charlotte Hill O'Neill or Osotunde Fasuyi. Hmm. I'm supposed to be on Instagram, but I'm very seldom on Instagram. I don't like to look at Instagram. I like Facebook. I'm old school, huh? And they can also write me, Charlotte O'Neill 08 at gmail.com. I also have a Yahoo one, but I think the Gmail one is easier to remember. So they can do that. Maybe you can put it like on the bottom of your
Yeah,
screen at some point. Yes, yes. And our website is UAACC.net,
yeah, I
which
can put
needs
all
to
the
be updated.
yeah, I can put all those links into the
Yeah.
description of the video so that the audience can reach it faster.
Yes.
I guess another.
For years I've been wanting help on art in our archive, and now we have a sister from New York who is coming and doing an internship. So she'll be able to help us finally digitalize. Oh man, you hear that phone?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah, popular.
sorry.
No, no stress,
Here,
no
wait
stress.
just a minute. Just a minute.
No stress, no stress.
Okay. Call ended. I'll call in a few minutes. Yeah, so what was I talking about, Ryan?
You have an intern coming to help with the archives.
Yes, yes. So that's a dream come true. And there's also some people in Birmingham who have taken that on as one of their projects, and they're coming in December. Well, there goes electricity. Now we switched over from the generator to the regular electricity. You
Okay.
saw it go black for a minute.
Yeah, for a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but the internet didn't cut off, so that's good.
No, it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I guess just a few more questions. There's so many Panthers and political prisoners that are still locked up behind the wall today, and there's those that are like your husband that are living in exile. Can you please discuss the importance of centering the fight of the freedom of political prisoners and those in exile today? Why is it so important today that we continue to struggle for the freedom of those behind the wall and those in exile?
Yeah, and many of the ones who are political prisoners are elders now and have spent the majority of their lives locked down. But even though they've been locked down all this time, they still are able to inspire people and to help teach people. I've witnessed it. I visited Mumia and saw how his spirits are and how people, just really love him and are inspired by him. I visited Eddie Conway like 3 times, and he had formed a group of working with the young brothers who were locked down, and many of them testified to how they were just changed. I even was able to go and visit Albert Woodfox, who passed away not too long ago, and Herman Wallace when they were in prison, locked down in Angola prison in Louisiana. And all these brothers and sisters have something to offer to the community, not only the communities that they come from, but the whole world community. They inspire people by their example, and they have so much to share. And the fact that they lock them down within an inch of their lives literally is criminal, especially when people have been locked up just for their political beliefs. So we must keep that to the forefront of the communities in America and the international community. They have to be released. That's why to say free all political prisoners is so strong, it's so important, it's so necessary. And I'm so happy that Brother Matulu was released. Shakur was released not too long ago, as was Brother.
Sundiata.
Brother
Sundiata.
Sundiata. Yeah,
Mm.
Akoli. Yes, him too. But there's still many more who are locked down. Yes, yes. So that's so important. And I just laud especially my Panther comrades in New York, mm, like Sister Yasmin and Bullwhip and all of them who, have worked Africa out of Philly, who have worked tirelessly for to keep the names and images of these brothers who are locked down and sisters who are locked down, so they won't be forgotten. So they'll be able to, continue to reach within themselves and be strong and let people know that, even though their bodies are locked up, their minds still continue to be free.
Mm.
Free all
Thank
political
you.
prisoners.
Yes. Free them all. And I guess the last question I have for you is what advice do you have for up and coming activists?
You know, I think we all have something to share with our communities, whether it's teaching urban gardening, whether it's teaching skills like masonry and electrical skills and coding and all of that. I think that's very important, and I think it's important that we form small cadres, not necessarily these big giant organizations that can be targeted by security there. To me, it's more effective if you have small cadres in your community. I mean, you all might know each other and be able to work together, but keep it more underground. Maybe I'm old school in thinking like that, but if you expose too much, sometimes that exposure makes you a target, and I like people to realize that the community service programs that we were doing back in the day, they're still needed. It's still needed for people to have programs to get people off of drugs, and to decrease the violence in the community, and to have rites of passage and things like that, and to explore African spirituality and all that, because things like that make you strong. Things like that help the youth recapture who they are inside. Mentoring programs are so very important. There's so many elders who have skills that they can pass down, and young people who might have gone through the streets, who might have gone through drugs or whatever, and have recovered who they are. They can be powerful examples to the young people who are looking for examples. So I urge people to don't forget to learn and to teach how to do things with your hands. Don't forget to impart the importance of being in nature. Don't forget to spread peace and love and embrace who we are as a people, as our African centered people, and as members of the global community.
Thank you for that wisdom and advice. Those are all the questions I have for you today. Is there anything else you want to add before we close?
Remember, peace, love, unity is what will change the world. Be an example of how we want the world to be. Walk in good character. Share your knowledge and love yourself. Because if you love yourself, you can love everybody else. That's what it boils down to. It's an issue of love. Yeah, I give thanks for this opportunity to share, what I have to share, and maybe I'll see you when I come over there in 2023.
Yes, absolutely. And the thanks is on our side, and honor and gratitude is on our side. So thank you so much. It's been a true honor having you on the show. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
brother. Okay.